there.
Hello, everyone. This is Lorraine from Bend, Oregon, USA. We are here together to talk with David about his journey to divine love. Also with me are...
I'm Beth and I live in Lincolnshire in the UK.
And I'm Yvonne Riley and I live in State College, Pennsylvania.
And David, would you just give your name and where you live right now?
Yes, David Lehning, and I live just outside Bellefonte in central Pennsylvania.
Thank you. So we'll start with the short prayer and then we will let David tell his story. Gracious God, Heavenly Father, thank you for this delightful day. Thank you for your love, for these friends and the many blessings you have given us. We thank you for our angel guides and all the angels who love and support us. We come together today to talk with David about his journey to your divine love and living in that love now. Please pour blessings upon him, one of your special children whom we are fortunate to have in this world. We ask that your love continue to flow into us, and we ask for wisdom, guidance, and protection as we join in this conversation now and throughout our lives. Thank you. Amen. So David, whenever you're ready, would
Certainly.
you please
Well,
go
you would
ahead?
ask me to give a little bit of background from my earlier life, and I should say that I was born and spent my early youth in San Francisco. So I'm a native of San Francisco, California. Then just about when I was ready to start high school, my parents and I moved to Sonoma County, northern Sonoma County, almost 90 miles north. And the reason for that was because my grandmother had moved up from the San Joaquin Valley to an older house there, and we wanted to be closer to her to be able to take care of her and this sort of thing. And from there, I went to the high school up there, Geyserville High School, then Santa Rosa Junior College, and from there I transferred to North Carolina State University studying meteorology. I graduated there in spring of '79, and from there I kind of hopped all over the place. I got my first job in St. Louis, Missouri, and unfortunately that company folded after about 9 or 10 months. Then I took a position up in the Chicago area, so I was there about 3.5 years. Eventually I went back to the West Coast again, kind of looked for a job, and I found something in Sebastopol in an apple processing plant. Worked there for about a year, then I decided to move to Washington State. So I went up with them to Eastern Washington, Sunnyside, Washington. It's a South Central Washington, small town. And as my luck would have it, that company went belly up as well. Went back to California, was out of work for probably a good 8 months. Found something in an environmental lab. With my science background, I was able to do some environmental testing. So I was there for a while, and eventually that company that was in Washington got bowed out by another group. They called me. They said, well, we'd like to have you back. So I thought about it. I said, well, I'll give it a try one more time. So went back to Washington, the same location. And would you have it, my luck, they did mismanage the company as well. So after that, I was deeply depressed. I've probably never been depressed in my life to that point. And because my resistance was down, I got a full-blown flu. I mean, total flu. This was about February of '88, I believe. And there's a friend of mine that I kept in touch with, whom I had worked with in St. Louis. And I'd kept touch with him. He'd worked at Cornell, and then he came to Penn State. And I knew he had started a new company, his own meteorological company. So I called him and said, is there any chance that you have any openings, anything at all? This situation that I've been through has been an utter nightmare, I told him. And he talked to his people, and he said that he could get me back there. So I went back to California for about a month, stayed with my parents there, and then moved east. that's how I came to Pennsylvania. Drove clear across the country, quite an adventure. Fortunately, the weather was good. And I came here in the early May of 1988. And I've been here ever since. Worked for Joe for about a year, and then he was having some trouble getting grants in. He had connections at Penn State University, and I was able to get work up there. And I was there for 19 years. When the Great Recession hit, I was out of work for about a year, but I did consulting work, so I wasn't in any bad situation. I did some consulting work, and in August of 2009, I was able to get back with Joe's company. It was called ZX, and they were located just half a mile from where I'm living now. Now, that time I was living in Boalsburg, which is about 11 miles from here, 10 and a half, 11 miles. Then I moved here to Greystone 6 years ago, so I was able to walk to work until I retired. I retired 2 years ago. Now, my spiritual journey, my goodness, that goes back to my youth too. I've always been a seeker. When I was in my late teens, I investigated things like what's called the New Thought movement, and they had what's called the Science of Mind Church and also Unity Church, and I attended some of those. Even when I was at NC State, they had a Unity Church in Raleigh, and I went there. So I explored those for a number of years, and eventually I found a couple of books on theosophy. I'd never heard of theosophy before. And I took an interest in theosophy in my early 20s. And actually, when I was in Chicago, I found out that the National Center was in Wheaton, which wasn't too far away. And I spent some time at Wheaton, volunteering work there and whatnot, and getting deeper into the study of theosophy. And I continued with that for a number of years. And off and on with various different things, the Rosicrucians and some of the other occult organizations, but it went on from there. And I always had a little bit of trouble with the doctrine of reincarnation. I couldn't figure out, the biggest problem I couldn't figure out is how in the heck we could keep coming back here and yet not remembering the errors we made in previous lives. I said, this doesn't make sense. How can we improve our soul and correct the errors we've made in the past if we cannot have any recollection, at least most people don't, of what we have done right and what we have done wrong? So I questioned this doctrine time and time again. And it was back in 2012, I was researching online, trying to find any information counter to it. There's loads of information in support of reincarnation. You can find it everywhere. But I wanted to see some counterpoints. So there's got to be something that has some other information or reputable information that says there's an alternative theory as to what might be going on in the spirit world other than coming back to this physical life each time and not knowing what we have done correct and what we have done wrong. So that's how I found eventually a link to the pageant messages. There was a site called Spirits in the Room, and this fellow, his name was Alan Ross, I believe, and he had a site where he felt like I did. He said, this doesn't make sense. God cannot have created a universe that we have to keep coming back, and yet we don't know what we've done correct and wrong. And it takes eons, and maybe you retrogress, you don't correct the errors, you make actually the thing worse. So I said, this can't work. This system just doesn't make sense. When I found the pageant material and started reading that, I said, this idea makes sense. The ideas that were presented from the spirit messages make sense. This resonated with me. And from that journey on, that's how I've come to this way of life. It makes sense. It works. I have a saying, I get it from my father. It said, people look for problems with something and want to improve this or improve that. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it. This works. This actually works. This is real. This is of the real. It's not some theory that's down, but somebody concocted. This works. The reincarnation doctrines go back thousands of years, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're correct. People have these different beliefs. The Buddhists, the Hindus, and on before that, even to the Egyptians. But that doesn't necessarily, it's ancient wisdom, it's theosophia, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the truth. This makes sense, it works. And that's how I came, in a nutshell, how I came to the pageant material in the divine love movement.
That's really interesting. Thanks for sharing that. And please continue.
Well, that's where I'm at today. I mean, I came, and then I gradually found these groups, yours and some of the circles. I'm more of a contemplative nature. That's why I haven't been on the larger circles, but I like the more contemplative type, like what you're leading and what Bill's leading, and this sort of thing, where we have prayer, maybe a reading, and then we go into silent prayer. That's kind of been my leading for quite a while. Actually, what I left out of some of my mentioning was the contemplative Christianity. When I was studying theosophy, they have a branch that studies what's called esoteric Christianity. It's more of a contemplative thing, but even within contemporary mainstream Christianity, there's contemplative movements, and they're contemplative religious orders. So I looked at some of those as well, and that resonated with me as well, that quiet going within, praying with God that way. That's another aspect of my journey.
So what's changed or has happened in your life since you discovered the divine love practice?
Well, when I've really been attentive, and there have been times within the last few years here that I have felt it very strongly. It's something I can't describe as I say it is. It is a peace that passes all understanding. It is a soul presence. It's to me, it's almost like, it's just so beautiful. It's just like like God is hugging me. It's like a hug of love. It's just enveloped in that, like my soul is lifted. I mean, it's very beautiful beyond description. And I've had that several times. So I know that this is a real thing. It's not some fiction that somebody thought of. It's real. It's something that's definite.
And that's what keeps you on this path, I can
Oh,
tell.
yes, indeed. Yes.
Can I ask you, David, you actually said in your written account that you'd felt this love before you came to know about
That's
divine.
correct.
Can you explain that a little bit about that?
Yes, I would. I do remember one time, well, it was a couple of times, but there was one time my parents and I had, first I should say, my father worked for United Airlines when they were still just a domestic airline. He was a maintenance mechanic at the maintenance base in South San Francisco. And so because of that, he had passes. We could fly on the airline almost free practically. So we took trips around the country, and one trip we had taken to New Orleans. And I do remember we were heading back to the airport. We had finished our vacation and we were going to the airport. It was pouring rain, absolutely just buckets of rain. And we were trying to get through all this storm to the airport. I was in the back seat and just kind of sitting there, and all of a sudden I felt this feeling of this wonderful presence, this wonderful upliftment. And I didn't know what it was. I was maybe 10, 12 years old, 13 years old, somewhere along that line. And I know what it is now, but I didn't know then. It just came out of the blue. It was just like spontaneous. And then it gradually faded away. Another time I remember is when I was on the grounds, the campus of the Theosophical Society in Wheaton, Illinois. And I was out, I like to do some of their garden work, volunteered out there. It was a beautiful spring day, breezy, kind of cool. And I was clearing some weeds out of the flower patch, and the limbs were swaying and all this sort of thing. Lovely morning. And I got up, and I remember getting up, the wind was blowing in my face. And again, I felt this hug of love. It just came out of the blue. Everything seemed to shimmer. It was just unreal. I said, what is this? And I looked around, it just like I was floating on air. It was something quite unusual. It's that same feeling. Just like it was enveloped in this loving presence, very powerful, even more powerful. And again, it gradually went away, but it just, these things stuck with me. And there's something here. What is this? Well, now I know what it is. We are loved so much that we just don't realize. It's just incredible. And when we're sensitive, whatever it might be, that where our souls are opened, then it comes. It comes. And somehow I was at peace doing what I was doing with the garden, or I was at peace as my parents were driving to the airport, not paying much attention. It just somehow my soul opened, and here this love comes in. So those are two times I remember before, long before I came to this path and knew what it was.
Can I ask you, did you have any religious sort of a religious upbringing? Were your parents?
Well, not really. That's the interesting thing. My mother was more the spiritual one. Father, I don't know what he believed. He wouldn't share it. He was a very private man. But mother was more spiritually oriented. However, we weren't a church-going family, so I wasn't really indoctrinated in any branch of Christianity or anything like that. So I was pretty much left to seek on my own. I would call my mother, bless her soul, I would call her just a non-denominational Christian. She didn't go to church. Ironically, my grandfather Lehning, my father's side, he was a religious man, a very religious man. He taught Bible school. He went to church in the town Geyserville there. And yet my father, I don't know what he believed, whether he was an agnostic or he just didn't want to share his beliefs. And I asked my mother one time when I was going to junior college, asked her one time, she was reading a book, said, what does Father believe in God? What does he believe? And she told me, said, you know, I don't know what your father believes. He doesn't share that with me. So even my mother didn't know what my own father believed as far as spiritual doctrines. But mother was the spiritual one. But because we weren't a church-going family, I was pretty much open-minded, which I'm thankful for because it left me free to investigate these different things without having some kind of indoctrination put in my mind that would have made it more difficult to get past, you see. So.
Oh, that was a blessing.
Yes, it was. I'm very thankful for that.
Yes.
The blessing. David, you talk a little bit about reincarnation. Did you have any really strong beliefs in reincarnation before you started to question it? And if you did, what sort of got you asking about reincarnation?
Well, I wouldn't say I had a strong belief because I had no evidence. I had never remembered any past life or anything like that. So I can't say that I had personal experience that would have led me to really believe in it strongly. So it was something that I just had studied and read. Well, that's the way they say it works, I guess, you know. So it was more theoretical than experiential. And I think because of that, I didn't have the depth of experience to say, oh, I remember a past life. It must have been this and this and so forth. I never had that. So I think my belief was shallow, and I was able to break free of that and investigate the counter arguments more freely than if I had had memories of what I thought were memories of past lives.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So now that you are on the path and have been for a while,
Mm-hmm.
have you had, excuse me, any healing experiences, either physically or emotionally, that you'd care to share?
I think, fortunately, I'm in very good health, but on the few times I've had some issues, I have prayed for healing, and it has come, and I'm always very, very thankful. As far as emotionally, I think even with all the stuff that's going on in our world, unfortunately, I think I am able to weather this more easily. Um, I've been able to be more at peace than I might have been otherwise. Um, so it gives me this time of prayer. I'm able to ride above it easier than I might have been if I had not found this. I think that's the best way I could describe it.
Thank you.
Perhaps it's jumping a bit, David, but all these different beliefs, and now you've come to believe in divine love, and that's your journey to God. Have you shared any of these beliefs with other people who aren't in the community?
Well, when we have met, I mean, we're not meeting much of anything now, our social groups, because of the pandemic, but
Mm.
when I have met, I've little bit here and there, a little bit here and there, I talk about divine love, that where there is that we can share and we can receive this divine love. And I talk about divine love as opposed to just love type of thing, you see. So I put little seeds here and there, and I'll put little notes here and there once in a while, you know, that sort of thing. So we had some social groups this last summer, and when we did talk about spiritual topics, that's when I would try to interject a little bit of the, just a little plant of seeds, because a lot of people here are mainstream Christians, so they're pretty narrow in their belief systems, but I try to put in a little seed here and there when possible.
David, one of the things that I think some people who are raised in a traditional religion have issues with is learning to pray in a slightly different way, learning to pray where you're not reciting a prayer, you know, something isn't written down. Could you sort of share with us a little bit your process when you pray, what you go through, what goes through your mind? Just to try to help someone that might be in that place?
Well, I think the best way I can describe my method, I start with a quiet meditation, and then once I still the mind a month, then I pray to God and I ask for the love, and I pray for those in our prayer circles. I pray for our world, for our country, but it's more of a contemplative type of prayer. It's going within and getting it to the point where I've released the cares of the moment and gone in to the heart and to the soul, and then prayed to God for love or for people, intercessory prayer, and so that sort of thing. That's the method that I use to come into prayer time. So I have a little place here in the corner where I have a cushion and I sit and get in the mood and get in the mind stilled, so I can get into a feeling for prayer, into the mindset for prayer, into the heart set for prayer. And so it's from the heart and soul. That's my method.
So
Would you,
when you say heart and soul, are you actually thinking words, or is it feeling? Can you describe for
It's
people
a
who
combination of feeling and words, I guess you could say. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could I also ask, when you do pray, are you aware that you receive God's love every time you pray? Is there a feeling that you are actually
Not
receiving?
every time. I don't have a sensation or feeling every time, but sometimes if the condition is right, I do. I mean, it's not every single time, but sometimes if if the conditions are right, then I do have a strong response. And again, I'm always thankful, but if it is there, I'm very, very thankful. And I just I'll have to say my heart is blossoms with thanksgiving.
Oh, that's awesome to hear. Well, here's a hard question for some people. I'm wondering if it's for you. Have you experienced any difficulties on this path that you'd share with others who might benefit from your experiences?
Difficulties, what kind of difficulties you have in mind? I'm just wondering.
Well, have you ever seriously questioned the decision to be on this path, like depression? Do you feel embarrassed to share your beliefs with anyone? Those are common things that I hear from others.
No, I don't think embarrassment. The only part of it that might cause tension here, because many people are more conservative Christians, is the idea of spirit communication. A lot of them are opposed to that. They say, well, this is, you know, and the Bible says, oh, you're not supposed to talk to spirits. So they go along that line. They would question that, not the divine love. If you just talk about divine love and God's divine love, that's fine. You know, I think they have no problem with that. But if you talk about spirit communication, that's we don't go there, that kind of thing with the doctrines here. That's the only stumbling block I would see in sharing this, is the spirit communication part. I don't think they would be very open to that. They'd probably push back against that kind of thing. So I don't
Following-
go that direction so much. I mainly concentrate on the love aspect from God.
Oh,
Following on from what Lorraine said, can you tell us if there's ever been a sort of fallow time, a time when you felt you weren't connecting to God and that you felt discouraged?
There have been a couple of times, but it's only because of some personal issues, and it was very brief, you know. But once I got back in, said I really need to sit down and pray about this. And once I sat down and prayed about it and started to really release whatever the problem might have been, then I felt better, you know. So there's been a couple of times, what might call the dark night of the soul. I mean, that happens to everybody. It happens. And I've had that. I have to admit it. I mean, I'm only human, so I'm going to have some times when there's some downtime. And that has happened, but not very often. And I'm very, very rarely depressed. I'm not a kind of person that goes into depression. It has to be something pretty catastrophic, like what happened in Washington that second time. That sent me into depression. It was just that was the worst time of my life. I have to tell you, that was the worst time of my life.
thank you, David. Does anyone else have questions? Beth, Yvonne? Any other
No, I don't think
questions?
so. I
David, that was
think
very
you've
beautiful.
answered a load of questions, a lot more than
David, do you have anything else you want to share with us that we didn't ask you?
Well, I think we've covered all the bases, but if you're welcome to ask anything else. I'm very, very much at peace with all of you. I love you all very much.
Oh, thank you. We love you. This has been a great time talking with you and hearing your story. And where do you see yourself going from now? More of the
That's good.
same, except higher?
Well, more of the same and much more, I hope.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you. This is going to be shared with others. So I think many people will be able to benefit from what you've experienced. And I appreciate your taking time to talk with us.
Well, I hope they do benefit. That's the whole purpose here. And if there's anything else, I would be happy to share it. I mean, this is just a wonderful journey. I feel
Thank
as though I have come home.
That's how I felt. Beth, Yvonne, anything more to say?
no. Thank you very much, David. That's been
Thank
really
you,
interesting.
Beth.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Bye.